and provide a platform to push new ideas. I'll briefly touch on two examples. Madrid adopted a free civic engagement platform called Contour and has successfully used this technology to get broader engagement during participatory budgeting. The technology also enables residents to pitch and promote ideas for new projects. If an idea receives a certain number of votes from the community, the council is required to evaluate the idea and consider it for adoption. New York City already has a similar approach with budgeting. We encourage exploration of applying this technology further. I'll just quickly go over some of our land use goals that we think that the commission should consider.
Have you submitted that to us?
No, I can submit this.
That would be good.
We believe adopting official plans for each community board that includes targets to increase the supply of affordable housing and identify infrastructure needs, clear and comprehensive fair share requirements and guidance, transparency and accountability in the land use review process so the public can weigh in before an EIS is submitted, tracking mitigation measures for all EISs prepared, including public and private land use apps, and requiring community needs assessment before the disposition of public sites. We look forward in the coming months to working with our partners in the commission to solidify more farming.
Thank you very much. And if you could submit that to us so that we could have a copy of it, Preston? Thank you very much.
Can you clarify what you just mentioned about EIS and EAS statements? Were you, you spoke about major developments and that the EIS and EAS statements should be submitted to the community boards? Is that what you said?
No,
I thought that's what you said, because that already happens now.
Right. We're saying that there should be mitigation measures to be tracked better when EISs are prepared for both public and private land use.
Okay.
I believe the council already has a process for tracking both mitigation and governmental commitments to communities pursuant to zoning changes, and they're tracked and published.
You may want to take a look at that, but if you could submit your testimony,
sure.
I would appreciate it. Roxanne Delgado and Alfred Lynch Jr.
Hello, how are you? My name is Roxanne, and I live in the Bronx my whole life. I'd like to start off first with the commission should have chose a better date. I'm sorry I had to leave a volunteer event for the primary date tomorrow, so I know you have limited choices, and also I would have liked if the commission would have introduced each of its member and your background, but I could look it up on the website. Okay, to continue, I'm here on behalf in support of term limits. Rumors says that this commission was convened by the city council to overturn term limits again against the will of the people. Like I said, it's rumors. Like I said, the people voted 3 times for 2 term limits. And actually my city council member, Jimmy Vaca, against the will of the people, voted until the 3rd term in 2009. Shame on you. But I digress. Hello.
I always thank you for your remarks, which are most times not pleasant, but
they're factual.
I'm proud of my service.
Factual.
I'm proud of my service. Other people can't say that. I'm proud of my service.
But it's first, you're interrupting my time, and second, it's a fact that you overturned term limits. It's a fact. So please, let's not argue. Let's be polite. I apologize, Commission.
Let's be polite.
I was really interrupted by my former city council member. There's a loophole that will permit him to run again in 2020, which would be the worst thing to happen to me. God forbid. So we need to close that loophole because the people voted for each city council member to serve 2 terms. Actually, city council member Karen Kowalskiewicz has served 10 years from 2000.
Karen Koslowitz.
I'm sorry.
Koslowitz.
She served 10 years and she returned in 2009 to serve another 12 years, totaling 22 years in service, which is against the 2 4-term limits, which is 8 years.
Yes, but what the legislation, I don't mean to
It's a
interrupt
loophole,
you.
though.
It's not a loophole. What the legislation says and what was adopted is that a council member can only serve 2 consecutive terms.
Exactly.
But
But
If they return after not serving, there is no prohibition.
But there
It's
should
not a
be.
loophole.
There should be a
It's the
prohibition.
law.
This is against the
Let her
spirit of the law.
testify.
There should be a prohibition, as you stated, where they not only can only serve 2 consecutive terms for years, but they also cannot return after serving those 2 consecutive 4 terms, because it's against the spirit of the people. You have to understand there's laws, but there's always ways to consider ways to circumvent the laws. I'm asking you to prevent that from happening, please, because you have to give other new voices a chance. These people are serving to the 80s. No offense, I'm not against ageism, but sometimes you have to have new voices. These people are the ones why I can't afford my rent anymore. They're saying, oh, city planning. It's the city council that approves these zoning. They have the final authority. So why they blame it to city planning? It's the city council and the speaker that does it. They have more power than the mayor de Blasio has. Okay. I'm sorry, but it's true. I'm sorry. And my second thing, district manager. They should be appointed, elected, not appointed, because it's a political position now. My former city council member chose our district manager. No offense to him, he's a nice young guy, but was he the best of the selection process? We don't know. It was a closed process. And one last thing, please, one last thing.
Okay.
Because I'm prepared. I wrote this at the last minute. Community boards, yes, term limits. District manager should be an elected position, and I guess I lost out. And special election. Thank you for your time. Thank you, permission. Have a good day.
Any questions? Oh, wait. Any questions? I just want to make sure what you said. You would like us to look at making the term limit prohibition for all time.
Exactly.
You get 2 terms, period.
They should not be able to be returned.
That was kind of a yes or no.
Yes, please, Commissioner. Please, Chair.
And you're also asking us about electing district managers in
Correct.
the community. Electing in the how would they be elected?
Just like the regular elected position, elected through
Like
election.
your council member.
Exactly. It could be the same terms. It could be the same process, the same year. It could run.
But the other members of the community board
No,
would not
because
be.
they're volunteer. They don't receive a salary.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is Alfred Lynch Jr. not here? Okay, and Dimitri Daniel Linsky and Grace Lavaglio
Yeah.
or Lavaglia.
Can you just hold that?
Grace, are you here?
Present.
Okay. Is it Lavaglio or Lavaglio?
Hello, Grace. Hello.
Okay, so, Mr. Glinsky.
Okay, good evening to you commissioners. I want to thank your staff for reaching out and inviting me to testify, following up on my testimony on similar related subject at the City Council Immigration Committee last year. Russian-speaking Community Council, the organization that I represent here today, is a 501c3 citywide nonprofit organization that is organizing and advocating for about 200,000 immigrant New Yorkers from 15 former Soviet countries, with a special emphasis on refugees, asylum seekers, and growing number of political exiles from Russia and other authoritarian regimes. And these are the people who are have escaped, indeed, what was called here taxation without representation in their native countries, and we want them to be able to find a better arrangement for themselves in their new home country. Which is why I will be speaking. Well, there were a number of very important and good proposals here that I would support, but I will stay within the city charter itself and only address our proposals for one section, that is Chapter 1, Section 18, Office of Immigrant Affairs. Well, our city is 60% foreign-born now by official statistics. And from our perspective, what immigrants need most of all are first representation and second, real economic opportunities. Well, Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, as it is structured under this article, gives them none of that at the moment. Its staff are very good professionals. They have plenty of good intentions, very dedicated, but often have very little connection to immigrant communities, which are not represented there and often feel excluded.
The charter has no provisions for regular input from these communities into the work and the staffing of this office. And many complain that the office is really not responsible, sometimes not able to respond at all to what's going on within as well as between immigrant communities. Meanwhile, in other cities, progressive governments have set up different types of entities and agencies on immigrant affairs that include community leaders and have much broader mandates than MOIA. Thus, San Francisco has an Immigrant Rights Commission, which by law must ensure that more than half of its members are immigrants and must hold annual public hearings. In Portland, the new Portland Policy Commission must, by law, provide representation from a reasonably broad spectrum of refugee and immigrant communities. There are similar immigrant councils in the state of Massachusetts, in the city governments of Nashville, Houston, etc. The federal bill on comprehensive immigration reform that was passed by the US Senate in 2013, that so many of us supported, had a provision on setting up new American councils at the local level. These arrangements are clearly more progressive, more democratic and representative than the current Office of Immigrant Affairs. So we urge the Commission to follow these worthy examples and to scrap the Office of Immigrant Affairs in its present form. Instead, there should be an Immigrant Rights and Policy Commission, more along the lines of Human Rights Commission. Its members should be appointed from candidacies of established community leaders submitted by immigrant-led nonprofit organizations. Its composition should be approximately proportional to the size of major immigrant communities in the city, but no less than one for any community of 20,000 people or more. And these commissioners, to be effective and to command real respect, should be salaried professional civil servants, partly because there are big differences among communities in terms of their leadership and their organizers being able to get funded for their work. Some are working for many, many years, providing government-community relations free of charge on a volunteer basis, because the discretionary funding process in city council is unfortunately very flawed and often very politicized. Some smaller communities might get a lot of money, larger, not at all. So that's what I wanted to submit to your attention, and we will be submitting actually a draft revision in writing later. I wish I could express support to some other proposals made here, but it was an honor to be here.
Thank you so much. Other questions? Thank you so much, Mr. Glinsky. Ms. Lavaglia?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm flying by the seat of my pants. I don't have anything to submit yet. I'm a community resident of the Allerton Avenue area. I am very involved in my community. I'm an advocate. I am the chair of the Neighborhood Advisory Board for the DYCD. I'm on some other community organizations, 49th Precinct Clergy Council. And I go to all my community board member meetings and my precinct council meetings, and pretty much any meeting that I think is going to benefit the community, such as this one. And I basically wanted to address the overdevelopment of our community. The other lady that spoke about the AMI is like rocket science. Nobody can understand where they get their numbers from. So if there's any way to get rid of that and come up with an actual formula that will work, that would be good. This housing crisis that people keep talking about and are buying into is really not a housing crisis at all. It's a manufactured housing crisis. The problem is that the rent, you have developers coming in and raising the property taxes and the rents come in. Affordable housing, when you say affordable housing, I think it's like 30 or 35 is affordable. What about the people that maybe make 15 or 14,000 a year? We're not even on the chart. There are people, the elderly, the disabled, people that may not be part of SCREE or DREE and things like that. There are homeowners that are struggling to keep their homes because everything's going up. So there's no lack of housing. There's housing, but it's just not affordable. And making $30,000 a year does not make something affordable either, because in our community, we have more low-income people than affordable income people at this point. So that's just basically what I want to say.
Okay.
I got
51
50 seconds,
left.
okay. There was something, I should have wrote this down. The methadone clinics that are popping up all over the place, and the shelter, they're converting apartment buildings into shelters without any community input at all. It is ruining our quality of life issues, and I think that needs to be more transparent. The community has to have a voice in who's going to be living next to us. We don't know who's living next to us. We get people from who knows where coming down, displaced from Brooklyn and Harlem and wherever there's gentrification is going on. They get displaced, they come to the Bronx, and they bring their bad habits with them. And we don't need that. We have our own bad habits. And I just want to say one last thing regarding the police. Before people bash the police, yes, there are problems with some things. However, the police have a very hard job. And I think we need to support them. If more people are involved in their police precincts, like I am, a lot of people in the community are, you get to know your police officers, you know your captain. They have the neighborhood coordination officers now, which is basically like bringing back the beat cop. So it's not, I don't know where people are getting that other information from, but if you do consider having a CCRB or having a different commission overseeing the police, they need to be mandated to train and go to the Citizens Police Academy for training before anybody can be on any board that's going to decide what happens to a police officer when they're doing something that they are required to, that they have to do. I mean, they have to protect themselves as well, and not only us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Glinsky and Ms. Lavazia. Okay, I've been asked to say, anyone who's testified today who has not already submitted copies of their written testimony to the staff, we strongly urge you to send a copy of your testimony to the commission, either through our website, which is www.charter2019.nyc, or by email to info@charter2019.nyc, or you can give it to one of the staff members seated here, including Jonathan, who is just sitting down, who's raising his hand, Anne, who is sitting and was raising her hand, is raising her other hand, or Indiana or Janita, who are not raising their hands, but there's Janita, there they are. Okay, and we will take that testimony anytime. The next speakers are Egidio
Sementelli.
and Alex Gamorda.
Ephraim.
Well, it's your handwriting, actually. I wrote that. So we'll blame you. Okay, good. Yes. Are you talking about Mr. Fayella? Well, I called Egidio first.
Oh, very good. Okay, my name is Sementelli, Egidio Sementelli. And I'm here to say that my city council, or the city council itself as a whole, has been doing such a great job. I support a third term. That's a joke. That is a joke. And my point is, it's a joke because this is what the community is speaking, as Ms. Delgado said. This is a joke, and I hope that this committee, this revision, charter revision, that actually legislated itself as a board, which I think there's a conflict of interest if it ever comes up, but I hope it doesn't come up, but that it created
Just
itself. I'm hoping some of the brave members here, by the end of my 3 minutes, will say, no, we don't support a 3-term, and we're not going to advocate. This board will not advocate for one. And I'm looking at him. I'm waiting for him to do it after my 3 minutes, but we'll see. And but I testified at the mayor's revision. I'm here. Thank you for having us here. Thank you for spending this evening with us. But there are certain issues. One of the issues that we need to do, or would like to suggest, is that the Department of Investigation, the chairperson, the director, instead of being appointed, should be elected. Should be elected as one of the independent bodies, as the public advocate and the controller. It's a fair and balance of, considering our government is a one-body system. I think the only other government set up that way is somewhere in Minnesota. So it's very, very strange, large city. So I think it's strange that we don't have an upper body or upper house. And
We did.
we did.
The Board of Estimate.
The Board of Estimate. And we revised it in '89, absolutely. But when they revised it, and the federal government approved it, and authorized us, New York City, to adopt this new form of government, there was a balance. There was an independent controller, an independent public advocate, to balance out a one-body system. To balance it out. Because this is what it needs to have, a balance. And the community boards were part of that, independent. We keep hearing about advisory. The community boards itself have an independent agency. They're not a mayoral agency. They're an independent agency. They have the same authority. One of the problems is that the politics of our local city council people that influence our boards, our community boards. How do we remove that? We remove that by, in addition, if I may, I'll round up. If one of the ways to do it is to eliminate the appointment by the borough president or the recommendation of the city council, have them go through a petition process and possibly let their neighbors sign a piece of paper and say, we want you to be on the board, and have those individuals. We don't need the other boards. I've heard people testify here, 3 or 4 other, I think they want to create 3 or 4 other more boards. We don't need other boards. We have the community boards that are in place already. We just need to strengthen them, make them independent from the politics, get the politics out of the community boards, and have, thank God that the mayor's commission revision is going to have term limits. So I think that's all positive, and this is what we need. And in addition to that, the reason to reinforce the fact that we need a term limit, the councilman mentioned the 197. I sat on the community board, and obviously it's very difficult to create a 197. That is the means of creating some of the testimony here by the not-for-profit organizations. That is the means. How many 197s have been produced by the boards? Very, very small. Very, very small throughout the city.
Probably ask Mr. Weisbrod.
I don't even think there was community board 10 ever produced a 197, and I don't think a lot of boards have created a 197. It's a difficult process.
It is.
It needs a lot of technical individuals, a lot of city planning, urban planners to actually establish one. So I think that's where we should be going, and to re-strengthen our boards or to resolve a lot of the testimony and a lot of the issues that we're raising today.
Would people really, I'm sorry, but do you think people would really get involved? You're way too young to remember the anti-poverty boards, and they were elections by local communities that would distribute certain kinds of money, and not many people voted in them. Similarly, when we elected school boards,
yes,
we also didn't get vast amounts of turnout, even though parents were involved and PTAs tried to get people out. Do you think if we had elected community boards, we'd really get any wider cross-section of the community?
You would get a higher caliber of individuals that want to commit and volunteer. I've been volunteering for 30 years. You would get people that volunteer a higher caliber. You would get the politics out of it. That's the most important. The only thing that influences our community boards and restrains it, and they become a focal point. I heard the council person here talking about The city council's been selling their districts out for the past 50 years. Who are they kidding? Now they want control. They want local control. They've been selling out their communities to developers for years. Look at their campaign coffers. Each city council person.
But if
Developers call the shots in New York City. Eliminate that, re-strengthen the community boards, and have them a real say.
are you suggesting that we look at the conflict of interest and how elected officials collect money for their campaigns?
Well, a Department of Investigation, independent or elected as an independent office holder, is an agency, independent agency, not appointed, would hopefully be able to resolve some of these issues. We will talk about CCRB that want to cover oversee the police, but we didn't talk anyone mention about the politicians. The politicians have to be overseen. The politicians, you need an independent board to go see them. You can't trust our politicians.
They're all involved currently, but I'm gonna ask, are there any questions for this? Sal?
As usual, you pull no punches. Always great to hear your voice. Just a couple of questions. How would you feel about the city council having advice and consent, where a DOI commissioner or a police commissioner or the head of DOE would have to be approved by the city council, like they do in the Senate when the president proposes high-level officials, that would give the council and the communities at large an ability to vet folks better? What's your position on advice?
I don't believe that it should happen that way. I personally believe ultimately the most powerful endorsement is a vote. And if someone elects an individual person or an individual position of the Department of Investigation through a vote, that empowers, that mandates that person to be independent, to be liable to the individuals and to the people. So anything else would still be political.
What about the public advocate who's elected having that responsibility?
So true. There is some, they have some, but unfortunately, the mandate of an investigatory agency would hopefully subpoena power.
Well, that
would subpoena power would be a big plus.
But one of the things we're charged with is looking at the powers of elected officials and possibly restructuring them. So public advocate would also have play that role as the DOI.
Well, I haven't seen any public advocate take that position or be aggressive to it. Although Mr. de Blasio challenged Mr. Bloomberg and he got into the City Hall. I told Tish James the same thing. I said the road to City Hall is through challenging your mayor. She kept quiet. Now she's running for something else, right? And so that the point is we need independent bodies. Independently elected where the vote of the people might be small, but the vote of the people mandates the requirements of a position of especially an investigator or special prosecutor or director or a position of Department of Investigation.
Lindsay?
A little bit of a follow-up question to what Chair Benjamin asked. You pointed out both if I'm paraphrasing correctly, that someone who's elected is inherently independent, but you also indicated a frustration with the fact that donors to elected officials' campaigns dictate a lot of how they behave once in office. Are there campaign finance or other changes you would like to see to help reduce that conflict?
Absolutely, you made an excellent point. I think in reference to the DOI, you should finance it. Finance that campaign. No contributions. 0 contributions for a special prosecutor. That would eliminate all influence of money.
Anyone else? Allison?
It would be, so how would one qualify to get, I'm assuming 0 financing them, it's publicly funded?
Petitioning.
So anybody who got the requisite number of signatures would get the same baseline amount of money from the city to
The
run?
system is set up that way, yes. That would be an appropriate means of show of support.
Let me,
I mean, we can't allow the bar association to do it if that's,
Well,
I don't wanna see any
I
outside.
think there are some constitutional challenges to that based on wealthy individuals being able to then spend without limit because we couldn't stop them, et cetera.
if I could just comment on that, Madam Chair.
Yes, I'm sorry.
The idea of public financing the campaigns is not a novel idea. We're at least, my bar president, Eric Adams, appointed me. One of the things that he said to me, he wants to see public finance in the campaigns, so we get the money out of politics. It's not like we're reinventing the wheel. You look at Seattle, you look at Arizona, you look at Connecticut, you look at Maine and Vermont. They have true public finance in the campaigns. Of course, you can't just go out there and run for office. You have to go out and make sure that you're a credible candidate. There are ways to do that, but my point is that this is not unusual. Other cities and localities are doing it, and states are doing it. So we should be doing the same thing, especially in view of the issues we've seen with pay to play in New York City.
Good, so you're gonna be influencing the board to get an independent DOI.
I'm one of 15 commissioners.
Good, that's all. We start with one.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Camarda, sorry.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Alex Camarda. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor at Reinvent Albany. Reinvent Albany is a good government organization. We specialize in open government, transparency, and the freedom of information law. It seemed from the testimony I heard tonight, listening to many people provide their recommendations to you, that there's a real need for greater engagement with government, more democracy, more input into government decision making. So I hope our recommendations tonight provide an avenue for that. We think that Chapter 47 of the Charter, which is entitled Public Access to Meetings and Information, should be rewritten, should be overhauled. It's a chapter of the Charter that feels very dated when you read it. I think much of it was written probably 30 years ago, before we had cell phones and before the internet, and before a lot of the modern technology we have today that could provide an avenue for input by the public into government decision making. So we have three broad recommendations in rewriting Chapter 47. First, we think that city data, that is data housed in government agencies, should be by default open to the public with few exceptions. Secondly, we believe that many of the processes that agencies engage in with the public should be digitized and much of the paper-based processes eliminated. And then third, the city has many agreements with outside entities, academic institutions, and so forth for data sharing, sometimes of personal identifying information. And we think the parameters of that sharing should be disclosed to the public, much like the focus you've seen on technology companies like Facebook and so forth. With regards to the open data recommendation, we think that could be realized in a number of ways. First, we think the city open records portal should be codified and put in the city charter. It's currently created by an executive order and administered by the Department of Records and Information Services, commonly known as DORIS. We think Council Bill Intro 328 of 2014 provides a starting point to codify the open records portal in the charter. We think the public data directory, which is in the charter in this section, should be eliminated. It was a precursor to the open data law. We think the open data law, which is currently in the administrative code, should be strengthened and put in the city charter. We think the mayor's office of data analytics, which was also created by executive order, should be put in the charter, its responsibilities outlined, particularly for its director and also the chief open platform officer. So many other recommendations which are in our written testimony, but all of them are oriented toward making the city more modern and creating a digital infrastructure to enable the public to better communicate with city officials.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carter. Questions?
Yes,
Carl and then Paula?
I thank you for your testimony and look forward to reading your written testimony as well, and especially grateful for your work in Albany. The recommendations that you make here, do you have examples of best practices elsewhere that could be models for this, for your recommendations?
Sure. I mean, it really depends on the particular area that we're talking about. I mean, the city was one of the first to pass an open data law, and it's kind of a model for the country. At the same time, when it comes to the Freedom of Information law, most states and localities, including New York City, are really behind where the federal government is. The federal government has a much better Freedom of Information law infrastructure. For example, they have agencies submit reports that provide very detailed information as to the types of requests for records they receive, how each of those requests is handled and processed, and they make available Freedom of Information law requests to agencies once they're granted to the public. So it creates kind of a reading room of government documents, and it also eliminates work for city agencies because they're not processing the same requests over and over again. They can just point to a reading room where it's already been made available. And there are entities in New York that do this. The Port Authority is one, for example, that has actually a reading room of all requested documents that were released via FOIL.
I would just, if you could follow up and submit as a sort of a postscript to your testimony, the best models that you're aware of throughout the country. That would be helpful.
Sure, we can do that. And then I think that when it comes to digitizing the infrastructure of the city, I mean, there's a lot of processes that are in motion at different agencies. For example, I know when it comes to procurement, they're updating the Vendex system with Passport. I know that many vendors complain about having to submit RFPs sometimes in person, via mail. I think that will help cure that problem, but there are many paper-based processes, whether it's submitting an application for a permit or for a license, where you have some agencies that actually have made these processes digitized, and then others that have not yet done so, or even within an agency, they've done it for one form or one application, but not another. And it's really about sharing best practices within the city.
I think that would be, the more information you can provide would be helpful. I think the more efficient we can make the government, the better it's going to be, certainly between and among agencies as well as with the public. And the more transparent we can be, the better the public will understand what government does as well. So look forward to it.
Paula?
Just a quick question that's sort of a follow-on from Carl's, and that is, were you saying that you felt directionally the city was moving properly on open data as well as at the data analytics? Your concern is that it should be in the charter versus an executive order.
Correct. I think a lot of what has been done should be codified and can be strengthened in the charter. I also think goals and kind of a more coherent vision could be laid out in the charter. I mean, the rubber hits the road for a lot of these things on, whether they can technically be done and the different databases that are involved. And that's really something that's done best at the agency level administratively, but certainly the goals and the aspirations and the vision could be laid out in the charter. And for certain things that are in executive order or being done administratively, I think that those could be codified as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sementelli and Mr. Camardo. Louis Rotto and Matthew Cruz.
Cruz.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Chair Benjamin, fellow commissioners, elected officials, and members of the public. My name is Matthew Cruz, and I'm the district manager for Bronx Community Board 10. However, I am not speaking on behalf of my agency, but as a student of community boards and community government, as outlined in sections 2800 and 2801 of the city charter. While my remarks will be brief, it is incumbent upon me, in light of the proposed voting item that will decide term limits for community board members this November, to remind this commission that community boards continue to play a vital role in delivering municipal services at the neighborhood level. With term limits in mind, I ask that this commission identify ways to broaden the influence of community boards in areas such as the city budget and land use, two areas where tangible results can materialize. The commission can begin by measuring the impact of the district needs statement on our city budget. As currently outlined in the city charter, community boards are tasked with submitting annual district needs, but far too often, the community board expense and capital recommendations do not make its way onto the mayor's executive budget. Upon receiving this information, a district manager has to report to his or her board that the local park will not be receiving the funding it needs, that the city will not be expanding its precinct's manpower, or that the city will not be studying ways to create transportation alternatives. Moreover, many city agencies decide not to report its budgetary needs to the community board, rendering the district needs full of items that altogether just become a wish list. With regard to land use matters, community boards may decide to undertake a community-based plan known as a 197A, but since its creation, only 11 have been adopted and only 2 hailed from the Bronx. As many understand, land use decisions are by far the most important decision a community board can make. Strengthening 197A plans or enhancing the influence of the borough president to bring such a plan before the City Planning Commission can be a way to uphold the voice of communities and reinforce the importance of community government. Many community board members join community boards to protect neighborhood character. For arduous initiatives such as a 197A to not be afforded an official review further lessens a community board's resolve. As aforementioned, with term limits on the horizon, it is crucial that we develop ways to strengthen community boards. If we do not, then fielding new applicants will be difficult, as many will feel that they cannot affect change in ways that will serve their communities. This commission's review of items such as the district needs statement and 197A plan can determine the future of community board membership, and with it, its success in showing residents that participating in community government is a noble cause and that joining a community board is a rewarding use of their time. Lastly, as we are all aware, community board members are volunteers. I get 30 more seconds. Lastly, as we are all aware, board members are volunteers. All volunteers should be able to point to something tangible and feel proud of, as lending one's time is a resource that one can never get back. I stand ready to work with this commission on identifying ways to enhance the community board's role, as doing so will also have the added benefit of protecting the livelihood of civic associations that act as a stepping stone toward joining a community board. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Carl? Jimmy?
I have, I guess, one observation and one question, Mr. Cruz. Thank you very much for your testimony. The observation is that with respect to district needs statements that the community boards produce every year, and as you know, send them to individual agencies, ultimately respond or don't respond, and the response is frequently, shall we say, ragged. There is now a much more transparent analysis of those community district needs statements, and I don't know if you've seen them comparing community board to community board, and I urge you to take a look at it in terms of the first question. The second question with respect to 197A, how would you strengthen that?
I would make, in my opinion, I'm not speaking on behalf of my board, but an idea that I had was reinforcing the borough president's office. I think perhaps if we can get the borough president to sign on to a community board's 197A after all that work has been done for about a year or two, and that be brought before the City Planning Commission could work. I would love for the borough president's office to have a opportunity when the community board takes this action to then bring forward to the city planning commission.
So would it be that the borough president has a resource that would really strengthen the ability of the community board to produce the plan, or simply have an endorsement from the borough president that would then bring it to the...
Which would then, of course, be sent by city planning commission to review.
Thank you.
The next one was Jimmy Vaughn.
Let me ask a couple of questions. Do you feel that if if community board members felt that the 197A plan had teeth, that they would want to participate? Do you think that these plans being advisory from the very
it sort of determines their fate, absolutely.
So it's the community members are just saying, we're going to spend 2 years of our time putting this together, at least, and then it's only advisory.
Right, the fate is determined at advisory.
The district needs statement. I wanted to get back to that, and Commissioner Weisbrod is correct that there is an analysis now that compares community board from community board, what their needs were, and they give compare and contrast. But when you do the district needs statement, am I correct in stating that almost every agency automatically and instinctively says no to everything the board requests?
It's either no, or more information is needed, or in the fact that speak with your council members.
That has been going on for 30 years, and there has to be something done. And I'm glad you brought it up, because community boards have hearings. They involve the community.